Daniel, welcome.
Hi, good to see you.
Several policies which Labour are expounding at the moment. We're going to go have a look at them very briefly. Home affairs, crime, health, public services. What does Labour hope to bring to home affairs if it gains power?
Well, I'm passionate about public services. I work for a trade union that represents many people who provide our public services. And we're proud of what we've achieved over the last few years because, frankly, in 1997 people used to have to wait 2 years to go into hospital for operations. There were people queuing up on trolleys. Now, we've changed that. It's much, much better now. I don't get anything like the number of questions and queries about the National Health Service that I've had in previous campaigns. But the question is, what next? And what we want to do is move on from the targets and just talking about how much money we put in to actually creating what we're calling these individual guarantees. Things like the fact that if Labour's elected, you'll be guaranteed that if you're diagnosed with cancer, you'll be seeing someone within a week. And what's interesting is the Conservatives won't match that pledge. They say there's something wrong with having that kind of guarantee. Well, we think if you're a patient and you're in pain and you're worried, having that kind of guarantee is exactly what you'd expect when you're getting any other kind of service. And our goal was always to make public services as good in it as any other services. And we think that's realisable in the lifetime of this Parliament. But the other thing I'd just like to concentrate on is older people. Now, I know a lot of students are going to be watching this, but actually they'll have grandparents, they'll have parents who are worried, and my generation's worried about what happens to our parents when they get older. And that's why we're introducing what we call a national care service, so that people can get guaranteed levels of care. Because at the moment it's a lottery, and actually in Cambridgeshire you do pretty badly because Cambridgeshire County Council, as a Conservative council, doesn't spend enough on these services.
Iraq, Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda all occurred on Labour's watch. Where is Labour, if it gains power, going to take us in terms of foreign policy?
Well, two elements to that. First of all, let's deal with the big one for Cambridge, which was Iraq and Afghanistan. Quite clearly, Iraq was what cost Labour this seat in 2005. We had a very good MP, Anne Campbell, and I'm afraid she lost her seat because people were furious about Labour's policy on Iraq. And many Labour Party members shared that view. I shared that view. But that was then. The question is, what happens now? Now, in between times, of course, we've had Afghanistan, which is a very different situation because this is not just Britain and America. This is over 40 countries involved because there's a genuine worry about what happens if you've got a vacuum in Afghanistan. And that's why when people say, can't we pull the troops out now? I'm nervous about that. We all want our troops back as quickly as possible. But if you leave a gap and Al-Qaeda fill that gap, then all that happens is we'll have the conflict probably here or somewhere else. So the key question is, what do we do? And that's why I think what Obama's doing is really, really important. And what he's said is that we want to get a government there which can actually sort out some of these problems. That may well be listening a bit more closely to the Afghani people and respecting their traditions rather than trying to impose our systems on them. But a government that's strong enough to resolve their internal affairs themselves rather than leaving a vacuum. Once we're confident that they can do that, then we can draw back. But obviously, like everybody else, I don't want to see our soldiers in Afghanistan any longer than necessary. But foreign affairs aren't just a long way away, it's also Europe. And Europe's absolutely critical as far as I'm concerned in terms of tackling particularly climate change. And that's why David Cameron's decision to leave the European People's Party and join a bunch of really quite odd extremists in the European Parliament seems so strange and also so worrying, because I don't think as a major power we can be in a position in Europe where we're outside the mainstream, and I think that's why the Conservatives pose a threat to Britain effectively.
Okay. In relation to foreign affairs, we're talking about the global economy, but also Britain's economy as well. Obviously we're coming out hopefully from a financial crisis. What will Labour do to ensure that we do survive the financial crisis?
Well, two things. First of all, of course, when the financial crisis was at its peak, if we'd followed George Osborne's advice, people would have gone to cash machines and found there wasn't any cash in them. It's quite extraordinary, really, the attitude the Conservatives took. And also their analysis of why the problem started in the first place. I mean, David Cameron says it wasn't the bankers that caused the crisis, it was too big a state. Now, that means too many teachers, too many social workers, too many nurses. Now, I don't think that's what caused the problem. I think the problem was caused by the bankers. So the question is, what do we do now? And I think Alistair Darling and Gordon Brown have been steady and calm at times of acute stress and have basically steered the country back onto a sensible course, which providing we continue it and maintain the investment in public services, don't do the kind of dramatic cuts that Nick Clegg called for. And Clegg's position on this is extraordinary. He said that everything should be done by cutting, nothing raised through taxation. Well, Labour's got a balanced approach. We think that you do have to have some tax rises, and we've already done it. And in fact, one of the things we've done, of course, is what the Liberal Democrats were calling for at the last election, which was raising the top rate of tax. They've now dropped that proposal, of course. But we've done that, and we will increase national insurance next year, because we think that cutting public services, not only is it damaging in itself, but it would put the recovery at risk. So I think Labour's got a good record on the economy over a prolonged period of time, much better than the Conservatives. And I think actually it's the biggest issue in this election. And for people who are watching this, worried about whether they're going to have a job in a few months' time, whether it's their first job or whether they're in work, I think they've got much more chance of being in employment if we've got a Labour government than if we've got a Conservative government.
The welfare state, bedrock of Labour policy for years and years and years. The question is, can we still afford it, and what can Labour do to maybe adapt it for the 21st century?
Well, the answer to your question is, of course we can still afford it, because we're still a very, very rich country. But it's a choice, isn't it? It's a choice about whether you want top quality public services for everybody, or what, as I suspect the Conservatives do, a safety net to mop up people at the bottom, and better services for people at the top. And I've always been absolutely clear on this. I think the strength of our welfare state is it's universal for everyone. Let me give you an example. Under the last Conservative government, they changed the system for paying National Health Service dentists. It's a long time ago, but I was involved in that campaign, and I warned them that if they did what they said they were going to do and did do, you would get a terrible effect on the NHS. And they introduced an insurance system, essentially, and look what happened. Middle class people moved out of the NHS and paid the insurance, and they get a very good service. For the rest, it was a disaster. And 15 years on, we're still trying to pick up the pieces. Now, that was a small example of what happens when you do that to the National Health Service. And my fear has always been that if the Conservatives got back into power, and quite frankly, at the election the choice is Labour or Conservative, and it looks to me as if Nick Clegg might well back the Conservatives. If the Conservatives get back in, that's exactly what will be happening to our public services.
You may be the Labour Party candidate, but what about the man himself? What drives you? What are your passions?
Well, I've always been passionate about social justice. That's what drives me. And in this city, particularly in Cambridge, I see a very complicated city, quite a divided city actually. And the reason I've got Cambridge Regional College on the front of my literature is because, to me, those are Labour values in action. We have a fantastic university in this city. We also have another university, and we have Cambridge Regional College. And I look at the Liberal Democrats, and all I see them talking about is Cambridge University. The current MP is a fellow of Clare. The successor in the election is also a fellow of Clare. What I want to know is who's standing up for the rest of Cambridge. Now, that's what I'm about. I've been a candidate, I was selected by Labour 3.5 years ago, and I've gone around this city talking to people and listening to people over a long period of time. And the impression I've got is Cambridge want someone who's tough and independent spirited. And what I've said in my literature is I'm Labour through and through. But I also know that my party isn't always right on everything. And I've given examples of when I've stood up to them, and I'll do so again if necessary. But in the end, it's Labour or Conservative. Which side are you on? And that's the big choice.
Okay. Daniel, thank you very much, and good luck on May the 6th.
Thank you very much.